Okay, there's just a couple more examples that we were not able to get to on the first video. So I just want to do a couple more where we have to plug in, and then one where we have to read both a graph and a table. So our first item that we have on this part is we have f composed with g of 4. So g of 4 is going to be placed into the f equation, and then we need to evaluate. So if we're looking at it, it means the exact same thing as this. And so we have to find out, what is g of 4? What is g of 4? G of 4 means we have to come to our g equation right here, and we're going to plug 4 in for x. Now if I plug 4 in for x, I'll have 2 times 4 minus 3 would give us 8 minus 3, or 5. So we have f of 5 really in all actuality. And so when we set up our equation, we have 5 squared minus 1, because remember, whatever's in parentheses here gets plugged into this equation up here. So 5 squared would give us 25 minus 1 gives us 24. And we're done with that equation because we've got it, we finished getting it simplified. Now our next situation says we need g of f of negative 2. So I'm looking at g of f of negative 2, which is just a different format of writing the equation. So I need to find f of negative 2. So I'm going to look over here. I'm going to find out what f of negative 2 would be equal to. Now, if you might remember, this was one of the equations that we looked at the very beginning. So I'm going to be looking at negative 2 being plugged in for x. So negative 2 squared would give us a positive 4 minus 1 would give us 3. So I'm really going to be looking at g of 3 here. And I'm going to remember whatever's in the parentheses gets plugged in for my x. So I'll have 2 times 3 minus 3. I'll work through my order of operations. 6 minus 3 is just an answer of 3. And I'm finished with the problem. So our next problem, this is going to be the last one where we're actually plugging into something. This time we have f of x is equal to x squared plus 4, g of x is equal to x plus 1. So when I look at f of g of 3, I need to find out, first of all, what g of 3 is going to be equal to be able to plug it into the f equation. So I'm looking at f of g of 3. So for me to work this out, I first have to find g of 3. So I'm going to take the 3 over to this equation. If that's a 3, then my equation would be the square root of 3 plus 1. So which would be square root of 4, which is equal to 2. So in all actuality, my equation is f of 2. Now when I'm looking at f of 2, I would have 2, I'm going to take this 2, plug it into this x squared right here. Gives me 2 squared plus 4. 2 squared gives us 4 plus 4 is equal to 8. Now, the last example with actual numbers is g composed of f of negative 2. So I better find out what f of negative 2 is. I'm going to be looking at g composed of f of negative 2. So for me to work this out, I'm going to take my negative 2 and I'm going to plug it in over here. So I'm going to really be looking at g. I've got negative 2 squared plus 4. That's really what's going in the parentheses here. So negative 2 squared would be 4, plus 4 would give us 8. So I'm looking at g of 8. Now the g equation is this x plus 1, the square root of x plus 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and plug in my 8 for x, and I get the square root of 9, which is equal to 3. and I'm finished with that example. Okay, so this time we have just 3 things that I want to look at last. The first one we have is f composed of g of 1. So just like on the previous slide, the first thing I'm going to start is by finding g of 1. So this time, instead of a function, I have a graph. The y values are already provided for me, so I don't have to do too much work here. So if x is 1, my y value here is 2. So really I'm going to be looking at f of 2. Now I can find out what f of 2 is by looking at my f table. So I'm going to find when x is 2, I get y is 0. And at that point, I've worked out everything in this problem, and I have my final answer. Our next value says g of f of 3. So on this problem, I'm going to start off by finding f of 3. So I'm going to be looking at my f table here, and I'm going to find my x is 3. If x is 3, I'm going to get f of 3 would be 2. So really on this equation, I'm going to be finding g of 2. So when I find g of 2, I'm going to be looking for the y value when x is 2. So my y value here, if x is 2 on the g equation, my y value was 1. So g of f of 3 gives us a final value of 1. Now our final value, we see f composed of f of 0. This one's a little bit different, but it's handled identical to what we've already done. We're going to start off by finding f of 0. So when we have f of 0, when x is 0, my y value is 4. So really, I'm going to be finding f of 4. So at this point, I can look back over here at my f table. So when x is 4, my y value is also 4. And so when I get my final answer, f composed of 4 will give us 4. Alright, thank you very much for watching. We'll talk a little bit more about this in class, because we do have one final topic, which is a restriction on domain that occurs with these. It's not going to be very hard, but it does need to be talked about. Overall, that's the end of Unit 1 and Unit 2. Congratulations, you survived, and now we're getting ready for trigonometry.